As a potential career path, the benefits of becoming a world-class sniper can blow your mind, as the Sniper Elite series has consistently proven. You get loads of exercise, you get to explore beautiful vistas, and you can enjoy a adventurous and rewarding lifestyle. And everyone around you will find themselves blown away while in your presence. Jokes aside, including the two I kind of repeated, Sniper Elite 5 is the newest entry in the long-standing Sniper Elite franchise. I got to play through all the game at launch, but for one reason or another, I just didn't get around to doing a video on it till now, so right now I'm atoning for my mistake, retroactively. For those unfamiliar with the series, Sniper Elite is a fairly self-explanatory title. You play as one of the Army's finest long-range snipers, as you take on a number of challenging missions set in different locales, usually involving gameplay mechanics like stealth, assassinations, and intelligence gathering. These missions are connected by a series of narrative cutscenes, lore notes, and other similar material, all of which manage to keep the story moving forward. All of which manage to keep pushing the story forward. The story has never really been one of Sniper Elite's strongest components, and in fact there tend to be a lot of story-related inconsistencies and contradictions. But ultimately no one really cares because Sniper Elite is basically the Michael Bay of sniper games. You get an unbelievable ton of awesome and oftentimes ridiculous spectacle moments, all for the price of you temporarily suspending your disbelief. One of the first things that'll jump out at you when you start playing through Sniper Elite 5's campaign is how enormous the mostly open-world maps are, and the many distinct areas within them provide a decent range of opportunities depending on your preferred playstyle. Players will be tasked with a limited number of mandatory objectives to complete before retreating to an extraction point. However, for those seeking additional challenge, there are always side objectives, usually only 2 to 3 on average, with some levels offering more, which will grant the player secondary sources of XP and opportunities to unlock items like weapon attachments and collectibles. The variety of objectives, though, is fairly limited. While there are a few exceptions, most of the time you'll be alternating between assassinating high-value targets, blowing up enemy equipment, and stealing enemy intel. While having a limited number of objective types isn't necessarily a bad thing, it often can be when you take into account the fact that accomplishing them will often require you performing the same exact action each time, such as strapping an explosive device to the anti-air gun, walk to a marked desk to get intel, etc. Graphically, Sniper Elite 5 is a solid enough game, although in many areas it does appear to be quite a bit dated. It looks largely like the kind of game one would have gotten during the early onset of Unreal Engine 4, around 2015 or 2016. While there are some small rendering improvements in terms of cinematic presentation and dynamic map lighting, it's nothing spectacular. The developers didn't bother to take any chances in terms of pushing the engine to its limits in any particular regard. When you look at a game like Just Cause 4, which had tornadoes, thunderstorms, and other dynamic weather, in addition to having a fairly detailed and condensed world, it's really surprising that Sniper Elite 5 didn't try to have any weather systems or more complex environments of its own. And before anyone says anything, both Just Cause and Sniper Elite tend to sit on the fence between being considered AA and AAA game franchises. Neither franchise is an insanely high earner, and neither costs all that much to produce. And yet, where Just Cause innovates, Sniper Elite tends to iterate. All I want is incredibly complicated maps that incentivize stealth, offer players a lot of choice in terms of how to achieve the necessary and optional objectives, makes navigation fairly easy, and ensures that sniping requires at least some modicum of skill rather than just pointing and clicking with little to no effort. And a basic, no-nonsense, minimalistic story that connects the dots narratively without getting in the player's way. You know what game does all of this insanely well? Hitman. These maps feel like someone on the development team trying and failing to recreate the basic mechanics of a Hitman level without the remotest understanding of the mechanical depth of the AI and other corresponding systems that make those levels function as they do in the first place. You might think this is a baseless tangent, but believe me, there are some specific examples I can point to from my time playing. For instance, there is an absolutely insane number of downright basic level design mistakes. Like how you could find yourself bumping inexplicably into invisible walls where there should be no invisible walls because a rock the size of your big toe is sitting in your character's path. Or how the game seems to often advise you to vault over small walls that litter almost every single map, when you can instead just run 2 feet to the left or right and bypass it altogether in roughly the same span of time it would take you to complete the vaulting animation. Likewise, the game suffers from a number of other gameplay issues. The worst of these was regarding the sniping itself. There are many instances where, due to bad hitboxing or invisible walls, your bullet would not hit an enemy even if you were zoomed in on their skull, with the red marker indicating your aim was true, if they happen to be hiding behind a bush or other vegetation. Leaning around corners while scoped in would sometimes produce similar results. The levels themselves are just overall an incredibly mixed bag. While there are a fair share of obvious invisible walls and far too many buildings that are unexplorable static objects, there's a lot to enjoy when it comes to the set pieces. Whether you're sneaking through a tank-guarded village in broad daylight or ziplining your way across enemy lines into an enemy fortress under the cover of night, the spectacle quality here is often commendable. If you value Sniper Elite just for its somewhat over-the-top World War II aesthetic, to the point where none of the above issues matter to you, I can't blame you. Simply sneaking around and appreciating the atmosphere was definitely one of the top highlights of my experience. However, navigating your way through said level without alerting enemies is often far easier said than done. An obvious statement, I know, but the catch is that it's not just the enemy positioning or other external factors that trips the player up more times than not, but oftentimes just frankly bad or broken stealth mechanics. The cover system, which normally would allow a player to take cover from enemy fire behind static objects, has a tendency to not work as intended. Despite the player tapping the crouch button behind appropriate cover, sometimes the entering cover animation will not initiate, resulting in the player character still standing or crouching out of cover. If you happen to be under attack at that moment, the issue will result in you taking additional damage and potentially dying. It's never really made clear to the player at what point an enemy NPC or group of enemy NPCs will detect them. There's a wide range of inconsistency in this area, and I've had lots of experiences where I was pretty much strolling right past a group of enemy lookouts in plain daylight within 50 yards of their location, and they didn't even seem to register my presence. But I've also had other moments where an enemy based off little more than a single second of visibility on my part, where I'm well out of their usual range. They'll still immediately raise the alarm and summon every single hostile NPC within an entire kilometer. I'm not asking for stealth to be easy, nor am I saying it needs to be harder, but the current system needs to be overhauled to make it a lot more consistent across the board, so players can clearly understand preemptively how close is too close and what risks should and should not be taken. And on the flip side, have the AI more than ready to obliterate the player mercilessly with the collective severity comparable to an Elden Rings or Dark Souls boss, if you're a bad enough player to have all the information in front of you and still not act on it. Then your character should die again and again and again until you stop idiotically making the same mistake and in fact learn from it. We're in this current age where seemingly every AAA game and every AA game that releases has to be made easier and easier to appeal to inept game journalists and content creators. While I don't believe in arbitrary difficulty as in just being difficult for the sake of being difficult, I do believe in contextual difficulty. As that relates to Sniper Elite 5, if you're a sniper, your best advantage is stealth, first and foremost. If you make yourself known to the enemy, you better have a prearranged escape plan that you can immediately fall back on. Infiltrate, complete your assignment, and prepare for exfil. I shouldn't be able to single-handedly take on an entire enemy fortress filled with like 50 guys by myself. And while the occasional spectacle can be excused due to this game not being entirely realistic, of course, it's so frequent, so blasé here that it breaks the immersion factor entirely. There are literally Call of Duty-esque kill and push past enemies as they try to stop you escaping the zone sections, where you're basically just running and gunning with the occasional hold your ground moment. Any allied sniper trying this on the battlefield would either have been shot on sight, or apprehended, tortured extensively, and then shot. Setting aside the lack of realism again, which isn't really my core issue here, none of this does anything to test the player's actual skill. What we need is a return to the more traditional Sniper Elite mechanics, where enemies could be lured into traps, and the player would generally try to maximize kills without being discovered by enemy forces. A return to the more thief stealth system, a more suitable set of skills for a more civilized age. The unlock system, arguably one of the most important gameplay affecting systems in the game, as the ability to modify your rifle and other weapons to meet changing situational needs, is, you might admit, rather important for any sniper, is another area that feels lackluster at best. Instead of encouraging and rewarding players for genuinely exploring the map, all one has to do to unlock everything is just run to a specific crafting station and you've got an instant unlock. Exploration is treated less like something the player should want to do and more like something the player has to do. And considering this is how each level's objectives are already structured, seeing this approach likewise enacted for collectible hunting drains the fun out of the search. To Sniper Elite 5's credit, it is overall incredibly well optimized. While there is a rather rare instance of stutter when initiating a cutscene, the gameplay itself ran quite smoothly, hardly ever dipping below 60 FPS and never for any length of time. Odds are if you're running Sniper Elite 5 on any mid to the high range setup, you should experience no major problems, which is saying something these days when it comes to mainstream AAA game releases. Sniper Elite 5 is a perfectly competent, fresh installment in the longstanding series. It succeeds in carrying over much of what people loved about the previous games. However, its near-exclusive focus on reiterating rather than iterating often works against it. If you loved past installments, you'll probably enjoy this one. However, for those put off by previous Sniper Elite games, Sniper Elite 5 won't be the one to draw you back in. Sniper Elite 5 feels less like a sequel to Sniper Elite 4, and instead more akin to a rather large expansion DLC for said predecessor. Personally, if it was up to me, I'd just say sit back and wait for Sniper Elite 5 to release on something like Xbox Game Pass or PlayStation Plus, depending on whether you're playing on PC or console. It just isn't worth the individual price tag, but if it was added to a wider subscription service lineup, then it would definitely be worth trying out. That said, that's where I'm going to wrap it up for today. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. I appreciate all the support I've gotten over the past few years. I really do. If you want to leave a comment to say hi or get my opinion on something, even if it's unrelated, I'll be happy to talk with you down below. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe and peace out.